Hi, this is Deb from Deb's Days. It's Tutorial Tuesday, and today's tutorial is a bit different. If you've been a long-time reader, you know sewing projects for charity has been a big part of how I've spent my days over these last few years. I've made dozens of turtle pillows for Paul Newman's hole-in-the-wall camp. I've made dozens and dozens and dozens of quilts for other kids' organizations. And I've made hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of stockings for soldiers. This past year, I veered away from my Sewing for Good projects, and I realized I've missed it. So when my husband mentioned our neighbor was looking for something for his wife, who just recently went into a care center, I knew just what to do. Today we're going to make a fidget mat. These mats help soothe the anxiousness that comes with dementia and Alzheimer's. Usually when I do these tutorials, I give you directions on how to complete every single step. Today I've got a couple of specific measurements for you, but otherwise I'm mostly going to walk you through the process I went through to make mine. Along with your regular sewing supplies, for this project you will need an 18-inch by 22-inch piece of backing fabric, a 15-inch by 19-inch piece of front fabric, a 15-inch by 19-inch piece of cotton batting, basting spray, a glue stick, a variety of fabrics of different textures and colors, and then a variety of other items. I went with what I had around the sewing room, so I used a zipper, buttons, an empty spool, ribbons, a piece of cord, Velcro, and a little ball that has a bell on the inside. One caveat: make sure it's something that can be secured onto the mat with no rough or loose edges, and you also don't want anything that can unravel. I knew I wanted the mat to be no bigger than that piece of fabric that I had for the backing, so 18 by 22 is where I got started. I got out my graph paper and I drew an 18 by 22 inch rectangle. I also knew I wanted to use the backing fabric piece as the binding, so I'd need to leave some room around the edges. I decided to make my front piece 15 inches by 19 inches, so I drew that inside the 18 by 22 inch shape. I also wanted a bit of empty space around the edges, so I went in another 1.5 inches. On my graph paper, I considered each square an inch. I then looked at the items I had, and I drew them on the graph paper too. Then I taped 2 pieces of paper together and cut it to make it the right size. I used that paper as my mock-up layout and started placing the items on it to be sure it all fit. I arranged and rearranged some more. Then I realized it would make so much more sense to actually place the items on the front of the fabric itself, then arrange them from there. While in the middle of switching things over from the paper to the fabric, one of my little foster kitties decided it might be a good time to try and play with some of the items I had out. Can you tell she's in a bit of trouble? Once the kitty made her way back to the floor, I rearranged the things on the fabric. I went ahead and sewed the 4 pieces of textured fabrics together, so I wasn't having to work with them individually and I could just use them as one block. When I had my arrangement, I used a glue stick to stick the things down temporarily. Some were too heavy, so I just wound up taking a picture of the arrangement so I wouldn't forget, and then I started sewing the items on. I did just enough stitching to hold them down since I knew I was going to be securing them even more later. I did mostly straight stitches, even on the zipper. When I had everything just tacked down on that front fabric, I went ahead and grabbed my backing fabric. I placed the backing fabric right side facing down, placed the batting on top, and then added the front fabric. I used basting spray to spray both the back and the front of the batting, so when I put it together, the mat would be a little more secure. I smoothed out the fabric on both the back and the front. I then took it to the machine and began stitching things down even more. I used a tight zigzag stitch to secure the 4 corners of the textured fabric, the top of the ribbons, and even on the zipper. It looked nice and neat from the back side too. I decided I needed to add some tabs or something to cover the zipper ends. Now, if I'm making a zipper tab, I usually leave a little bit of it loose so you can grab and pull the zipper. But on this mat, I thought it would be best just to sew them all the way down. For the tab, I cut a piece of fabric 2 inches by 6 inches. I folded the long edge in 1/4 of an inch and I pressed it. I then folded it in half and pressed it. I opened it back up and I used that middle pressed line as my midpoint so then I could press the sides back into that to meet that midpoint. And I pressed it. And then I folded the entire thing over one more time and pressed it. I placed it on the end of the zipper and I used the glue stick to hold it for me just a bit. I then did more zigzagging all the way around to secure it. I did the same on the other end. I also added the same kind of tabs on the ends of this spool cording piece I had. Instead of having the zigzag showing on the top of the ribbon holding the bell ball and the kitten face, I added buttons on top of the zigzag stitching. As I was doing all the stitching and zigzagging, the blue soft yarn kept shedding. I thought I'd checked it well enough to be sure it wouldn't, but knowing this mat needs to be super secure with no loose pieces, I had to sacrifice the soft blue yarn. I clipped it close to the stitching and then I had to take the seam ripper to take it out. I wound up replacing it with 3 different ribbons of 3 different colors with 3 different textures. I then zigzagged to secure those ribbons in place and added a piece of rickrack over the top of it. Once everything was secured, I used the backing edges to make the binding. I folded the edges of the backing in to the edge of the front of the mat and I pressed it. Then I folded it over one more time and I pressed it again. Then I again used the zigzag stitch to secure the edges all the way around. I didn't do any additional quilting on this since it was all pretty secure with all the zigzagging I did. And that's it. I'm hoping this project will inspire you to make your own fidget mats to donate to those who might be in need. If you do, I'd love to hear about it. You can either email me or leave a comment in the comment section down below. If you'd like to see more craft projects, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and stop by the blog at debsdays.com. See you next week with another project.